Today is Friday, the 18th of February, 2022, and this is a dream that I had this morning. Gemma and Gabriel's big house. I was staying at Gemma and Gabriel's house and visiting along with other people, but I can't remember a lot of the first part of the dream. Gemma and Gabriel were in a big house that they just got/moved into. Despite that it was big, there weren't a lot of windows, so it was kind of dark inside. I think also the house was built or positioned in a way that didn't capture a lot of the sun. I was confused as to why it was so dark. It looked like evening going into nighttime inside the house, but when I looked outside, I could see that it was bright and in broad daylight. I asked Gemma if I could open one of the shade blinds that was covering a long window above the kitchen sink. Gemma said, "Go for it." I had to climb up on the bench just to reach the pulley, and I guessed that because it was kind of annoying to open and close this window all the time, or to open and close this blind all the time, Gemma and Gabriel probably just left it closed. The thought of leaving the window blind open all the time felt like a vulnerable thing to do, because anyone in a higher house would be able to see straight through to the living area at all times. I was going to mention it to Gemma, but then I thought it best not to complicate things and entice her to change her mind about rolling up the blind, because it really bothered me that the house was already so dim, and I just wanted more light to come in. I just knew that a house this big should have more light. Gemma was washing the dishes down next to me, and I think we were casually chatting. I had asked her a question, then I saw that the pulley for the blind was on the other side of the sink, so I had to get down off the bench and pull myself up again on the left side of the sink. I remember pulling myself up twice or 3 times before getting stable. I started rolling up the blind and noticed there was a lot of junk on the ledge outside the window. I opened the window and I started to clear the junk because I don't like untidiness. I was putting it on the bench/sink area beneath me instead of leaving it up on the window ledge so that Gemma and Gabriel could access it more easily and sort through what needed to be filed or thrown out. There was things like an old hat, random pieces of paper like handouts from high school, and maybe some like dusty books and just random little objects. On the ledge, there were also LED lights like lamps that had power cords but weren't plugged into anything because they were battery operated. It's strange now that I think about it. So anyway, I started getting off the old books and papers and random stuff from the ledge and clearing it up so I could set the lights up, which had been placed there by Gab and Gemma but not installed or set up for use. The lamps, maybe 2 or 3 in number, weren't secured to anything, which made me worried because it would be a hassle to get them back up that high if they fell off the high ledge. Suddenly, it was becoming evening. I turned one of the lights on. It was sort of complicated to turn on. It had 2 side buttons that would turn on to it had 2 side buttons that would turn on 2 small lights at the back of the little lamp, but they looked really insignificant and small, maybe like, 3 by 1 centimeter. To describe the lamp light, it looked like some kind of remote, and it was small and fit in my palm. I kept playing with it and then noticed that the light had images printed into it. It was a simple 2-step instruction on how to turn it on within a little grid of 4. So you had to have both side buttons pressed in to activate the 2 backlights, and then you could press another button for the main floodlight. The 2 pictures, I have no idea how they conveyed this much detail, the top 2 pictures, but it was clear to me that's what it meant, despite that the pictures were simple and despite that the little figurine was showing emotion, which is sort of confusing. It's not something you see in like an instruction picture, but the 2 little animations were showing emotion of someone like surprised and happy of once they get the light working. It was strange. Anyway, So I turned the 3 lights on, and oh my God, it was so bright. I couldn't believe the light output of this tiny little LED. The 2 lights, which I thought were too small in size, put out enough light to light up the whole patio in the backyard. Suddenly I realized that they would act as security lights in the night. Then the light which was facing me illuminated the inside of the house. And when I envisioned what it would look like earlier when I couldn't get it on, I imagined that it would be kind of like shining a torch or a spotlight in the house. But then when I actually turned around and looked in the house, the light from this little LED, the front-facing light facing me, it was as bright as having lights installed in the ceiling of the house throughout the living area. So it was a big living area with high ceilings and like wood detail, like wood planks at the top. And suddenly it was really just bright in the house, and it was like a combination of daylight and internal warm ceiling lights inside. So now that it was so lit up, the house looked more beautiful and there were no shadows anywhere. I was surprised inside myself because instead of just lighting up one area like I imagined, like a spotlight, it just flooded the whole room with light from the ceiling down. At some point, I was talking to one of my friends, Siobhan. She was telling me she had organized for me to meet a new friend. When I met the new friend, it was Brenda, who I actually in real life stopped being friends with years ago. I felt confused because I knew Siobhan knew that me and Brenda weren't friends anymore. But Brenda was happy to see me and nice to me, and I was nice to her. She looked different. I was happy to see her, sort of, but I felt really uncomfortable and didn't trust her. Later, as the dream progressed, I was speaking to an old woman with hollowed eyes, but for some reason, in the spirit, she was my brother, Antonio. Gemma was standing next to the old woman, and we were at the top of an industrial-looking staircase, and the staircase looked like it was in bad condition, and the place where we were in felt deteriorated. We weren't in the house anymore. There was a green caterpillar that crawled into / under the brow bone, and the caterpillar disappeared because it was so deep in there. So it was weird. It was like the woman / Antonio, my brother, was a skeleton with like thin flesh covering the skeleton, but not like dead looking, but dead feeling. The woman looked old and wispy with like long, curly, gross strands of hair on her face, and she felt unkempt. Brenda was next to me because she'd come with me because she had been assigned to help me and go places with me. During the conversation, the old lady had no idea the caterpillars were crawling around on her face, and when Brenda saw the caterpillars, she started gagging and turning away. I too felt repulsed and looked away, and when I looked back, I noticed another 2 caterpillars crawling around on the old woman's face and throat. I wanted to leave the old woman / Antonio's presence, although he wasn't really my brother now, it was just an old woman, but I felt a duty to stay and say something. So I told the old woman, "You have caterpillars on your face." I said it bluntly because I rejected the old woman in my spirit, and she reminded me of a dirty witch. The old woman said, "Oh, have I?" in an unbothered and casual way, as if it was equal to having an eyelash on her cheek or something, as if it wasn't gross and completely out of the ordinary. The caterpillars looked really healthy and green, and although I don't mind caterpillars ordinarily, I felt really disgusted by this old woman and the caterpillars on her face. Further along the dream, I was hearing complaints from Brenda. I was confused because they were racist complaints, yet she's brown like me. I remember forcing myself to listen closely so I could understand why she was complaining and speaking with racism about Arabs. Then I was shown CCTV footage of a large group of Muslim men, young and old. They had forced a local bakery or a local baker from the local bakery in a town or something to feed them bread. I thought the problem was that the bread was free, like they weren't paying for it. But when my spirit inquired into the matter, which is sort of hard to describe, but it's like I sent my spirit forward into the topic within the dream. When I did that, I understood that there was nothing that bad actually happening, and they weren't demanding to be fed bread for free. However, I felt like there was some terrorist activity though. There were really high numbers of Muslim men in this town, and they were forcing bakers and bakeries to feed them. And I didn't see any violence, and I wasn't sure why that was a bad thing, but I felt that it was the possibility of them becoming a threat that was the concerning part, but not so much the fact that they were expecting to have access to the same things as everyone else. I was still a little bit confused at what the actual problem was, and then that CCTV footage that I saw, what I saw was a lot of Muslim men, maybe like 10 or 11, of all ages outside a bakery and walking towards it. And it felt like a pocket or cluster of high numbers of, Islamic men had been placed in a small town for strategic reasons, including war and for seizing small towns. That's the sense that I got when I saw the CCTV footage.